Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. مساء الخير. كل عام وانتم بخير. Welcome. Welcome to Talk of the Neighborhood, an intimate circle in the Misa living room where we dive into storytelling and curious narratives. My name is Hanan Sayed Warrell, and I head up placemaking at Misa. As you know, we talked a little bit about Misa before. I'm excited tonight to be conversing with three amazing people. One who's amazing storyteller, one who forages for ideas, and one who loves to feed people. Nader Nahdi is a presenter, filmmaker, and producer from London with so many hyphens: Yemeni, Indonesian, Pakistani, and Kenyan heritage. He's the founder of Beni. It's a cultural lab and a channel where he documents contemporary life, Muslim life around the world, with emphasis on identity and culture. No need for further introduction. Pradeep, my colleague, Pradeep Sharma, moved to Abu Dhabi in 2018. He's the director of Arts, Culture, and Heritage program at the foundation, Salama bint Hamdan Foundation. He oversees many of the art programs that everybody here is probably very familiar with. But before moving to Abu Dhabi, he was provost and chief academic officer at Rhode Island School of Design. He's worked at the intersection of art and business in many countries, researching the role of creativity in everyday life. And the most important part is he has a doctorate in complexity thinking, which really complexifies our work every single day. There's always a different perspective and a different angle when we're discussing something with Pradeep. So I hope you get to see some of that tonight. Zainab Talati, a marketing professional, moved to Abu Dhabi in 2013, working with luxury brands and retail. But she recently founded Mama's Kitchen, a high-end Indian food delivery service that celebrates the rich tapestries of Indian flavors, tradition, and love. And many of you sampled that this evening. So welcome. Tonight, we're having a conversation amongst us and a conversation amongst the wider circle. So there's many circles here. We want to talk about community, how we build it, something we think about a lot at Misa. How do we build it with creativity, with art, around culture, around business, how all of these intersect. So Nader, you're someone who comes from a tradition of thought and influence. Your father was a giant in the British Muslim community, a journalist and an activist. Can you share with us how that shaped your sense of community?
Oh, absolutely, everything. I think whenever I talk about my work, I always describe it as an extension of the work of my parents. My parents were part of a generation of people who were the first, second generation of people in the UK. So they were working in very hostile environments. This is the time when people had very little knowledge or acumen of people of Arab, African, or Asian descent, hostile, people using the Paki word. These are like very difficult situations for people who are brown and black. So my parents were part of that generation who were building a sense of identity for people like myself to feel proud in. So a lot of my work is about like continuing that. So my parents' generation was consolidating a sense of you can be brown, black, Asian, and be proud of who you are. My generation is about continuing that, evolving that thought, and getting young people to start thinking about, we're proud of who we are, what does the art look like in that space now? So entirely inspired by my parents.
Pradeep.
Just jump in. I was probably part of your parents' generation, having moved to the UK in the 70s, where it was an incredibly rough, violent, racist country, and growing up in that. But I think the conversation we were having earlier, which really excites me, is once people have got through that first, second, third generation, and then they start diving into their multiple identities. And then what does music look like when you're Indian, Pakistani, Brit? And I think, we saw that in the 90s. We saw that with a number of really amazing musicians that came out at the time. You're seeing it in the art world. And I think UAE, and I can talk probably more about Abu Dhabi, we're in that now. We're sort of in that stage where people have been here for a number of years. So what does a Sudanese Emirates identity look like? What does that artwork look like?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating you say that. I think growing up in London and the UAE, there are so many parallels and things to compare. Just to kind of continue the thing about my parents is like they had no reference for how this worked. And one thing about my mother, what she always said, and especially drawing to the theme of community like we talked to today, is that you can't just expect community and these diverse landscapes to arrive from the sky. They're not just going to drop from thin air and happen on your lap. If you want to see the community that you want to thrive and live in, you have to build it. And my parents were proactive, they were leaders. Yeah. And community requires leadership and people to actually take that on board. But it comes with a lot of sacrifice.
But they were brave. I mean, that bravery, that sacrifice, because I mean, that bravery to speak out at that time was not easy.
Yeah, so you have a hostile environment from people outside in. Then you also have a lot of people pushing back from within the community itself. And it's happening here now. We have like this room is so beautiful. Oh my goodness, just like the caveat, everything. I'm at dinner and I'm like seeing people from all different faces of the earth, different shapes, sizes, but I'm also seeing like what I see so rarely, especially in this country these days, is like intergenerational environments. Opposite me, I had a 7-year-old. To my left, I had someone who was a little bit older than me, or my age, similar-ish. To my right, I had someone who very well established and a bit older. And that environment is so unique.
We miss Steve.
I was not trying to say names, Pradeep, but you put yourself in that environment. Nah, I'm messing. But those intergenerational environments, like when we talk about the village, right? When we talk about, the traditional village, which is nurturing for young people, is broken down in modern society. That traditional village is epitomized by intergenerational influences that benefited you in a multitude of different ways. You had the grandparent, you had the aunties and the uncles, you had the cousins, you had the friends, the extensions of family. It was this kind of 360 holistic kind of environment which helped nurture the generation that were really plugged in, who were really creative, but also not brave in terms of resisting against our hostile external environments, but were brave enough to understand, okay, look, these are the ingredients of my community. I'm going to be brave enough to make a decision about what this community looks like. Its texture, its values, its ethics, its ethos. And that takes a lot of bravery. Not many people feel brave enough to be asserting that opinion. But I'm seeing it here, actually. I felt a lot of it today. Like, there's a kind of cultural undercurrent here, which I'm feeling, and I travel around the world, and you'd be surprised how rare environments like this are. And I think it's testimony to the leadership within this project itself of how great a job it's doing.
And I think, Pradeep, Zainab, I'm going to come to you, but Pradeep, when you came here, 2018? I'm always fascinated by how you kind of put your finger on the pulse at that moment, just having arrived, and with the idea that we needed what is now Misa, that art and creativity, needed a home to coalesce, and then how how building a community really starts with the people, something that you say a lot, and I've always wondered how did that come about for you, having moved here?
I think there's a number of things about being sort of an observer of people anyway. You pick up on some of those vibes, but it's also a conversation we were having earlier about interpretations. We interpret cultures, so your food is an interpretation of your mother's cooking, and it's that heritage that's passed down. And you put yourself out there because then you're asking, was that samosa okay? And it was a Punjabi samosa, not the. And so we have these interpretations from our families that we're kind of interested in. And I think, what's always excited me here was we started the Emerging Artist Fellowship. We've just finished year 10, so we have 160 alums out there now. That is a long time in UAE history. It's not a long time in the Emirates because 10,000 years. But where do those people go? So it's really a micro response. And I think it's not a grand gesture. It's not a large, we don't want to change the world. We just want to shake it a little bit. And so that was where I think that observation of how do we start something small and selfishly to find people like us? How do you meet people that are interested in food, making Palestinian food and trying to bring your mother's recipes in? Those are the places we want to create. How do you find the lunatic jewelry maker that's making jewelry that changes
Raise your hand.
And so a lot of it was how do you create this village that it's got a big roof? And so that's kind of how it came. And I think, that's really been driven out of an interest in creative eras in the past, what has caused them. People have been waiting. Suffering is usually one part of it. I think that's something we need something to rub up against. Arts always flourish when there's things to respond to, activism, actionism. So I think those were all here, and you could sense it. You know, when Zarina, Ala just meeting the Sudanese group, and the conversations we had around, we'd have these debates. Whose fool is better? Is the Sudanese fool better than the Egyptian? Now, where can you have those conversations? How do you create that environment?
No, speak up.
So, but yeah, the food is, I think, is a really good way. And so, you know, we've bonded over food.
But, Zainab, just to push you, like, what were you concerned about when you were asking if it's okay to have a Punjabi samosa or a Gujarati one and all the different kinds of foods that you wanted to present on the table? Were you worried that there would be like a lack of consistent authenticity? Like, what was that concern about?
No, I just like it when people say they love the food. So I think that's really where I was going with it.
So you didn't really care less about where it came from specifically?
No, I do care. Of course I care. And I think, you know, because we're not Punjabi, so to have a Punjabi potato samosa is a big responsibility when that particular samosa isn't traditionally part of my background, but it's still there within the culture that I was brought up in. And we talked about, you guys touched upon community and, you know, and your parents. For me, this journey has been a massive tribute to my father, to my late father, because he was the pillar of the community. What does that mean? That means that he was the person people would come to get advice from. He was the person that people would come to when they wanted to get married and their parents wouldn't let them. He was the person leading the salah at the masjid. So he was the one that people would gravitate towards, and the way that he would show love and affection, apart from giving his time, was to invite them to our home to enjoy our food. And so we had people from all types of backgrounds. I grew up in a very diverse community, African, Caribbean, Jamaican, you know, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. We had, growing up, such a wide range of people coming to our home on a daily basis. And sharing food with one another was the one thing that was uniting everybody. But going back, actually, I remember growing up, we were actually born in Lancashire. So we were one of the only Asian, Indian ethnic families within a 50-mile radius. So again, I saw this from a very young age. How did my father, you know, get to know the neighbors? How did he become friends with everybody? How did he become so loved? Again, by sending food to everybody. And so this has been such a big part of my childhood, and for me, creating a community means so many things, but food is a massive part of that.
And Nader, you shared with us how food plays into your, even though you're not a chef, but that it's such a big part.
All right.
Oh,
Try my
yeah.
food first. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you're next.
Hanan is caught on blurred train. So
We've got a kitchen over there.
It's like low
Nader.
blow, Alan. Jeez. Yeah, no, you're totally right. No, food is a vehicle, right? It's like when you talk about transmitters of culture, for me it's food, music, art, poetry. These are things that I'm very fascinated in as a storyteller. But I was just listening to what both of you said, and I think it's really fascinating. I was going to push you back and being like, what are the challenges in creating a space like this? And I love what you were talking about being the concern of like authenticity and cultural transmission and the responsibility of that. And I love that you feel that. And then I feel like we also, like, all of us are growing up. I mean, I live between London and the Middle East, so I get to see both of these front lines, and they have very different kind of textures and nuance. I was born and raised in a city that cultural appropriation is a thing, and people are very sensitive about that. Like, you cannot partake in a culture that's not yours, and because there's a power associated with it, and I totally understand that given the context of, like, British colonialism or what that means. But here it's kind of different. People partake in culture very differently here because there isn't a power dynamic. There isn't a political history here that appropriation is relevant. So it's weirdly, I want to say controversially, more beautiful and organic and more mixed in a way that London might be more hostile and paranoid. But what I wanted to say is, you know, I grew up with my grandmother. If you came to my house, and you came to my house, and my Pakistani grandmother saw you, and it was Eid or we were celebrating a wedding, she would have got her own clothes and put them on your back. She would have showered you in culture. She would have made you participate in the traditions. Like, this idea of like appropriation wasn't a thing in our cultural house. It was like, culture was something you gifted to people. It was something given. It wasn't something you held and kept private. And No, never. Just for me,
share it.
exactly. So when I think of a space like this, which what you guys are trying to build, it's like culture in isolation is not what it's about. It's like sharing it more. It's like it's what makes you unique is actually what brings us together as opposed to like sets us apart. Whereas in a London environment, what makes you unique is also quite an isolating thing. This is a Arab thing that we do, and this is a West African thing that we do, and it's very hostile within that political context. But here, there's an opportunity because it's a level playing field to actually like have something that's a bit more integrated and mixed. But yeah.
What are some of those challenges, Pradeep, that we're going to encounter?
I think a
or have
lot
encountered?
of the challenges, I mean, bearing in mind sort of the areas I'm interested in here are arts, culture and heritage, three words that are really, really problematic to pin down. And I think, you know, the issue for me with culture is we commodify it. You know, then it becomes a thing that we want to give to people, or we stick it in a museum so we can go and see it. And for me, cultures are happening. And so culture is things that arise between people. So in terms of complexity, it's not something that's held within something, but there are artifacts of culture that are timely, that are also in between. So for me, the culture, the sharing is rituals. So what are the rituals that we can create? And I think, you know, Ramadan, we're sitting here, which is a ritual to remind us of certain behaviors to ourselves, to God, to each other. And I think those rituals, you know, with Zarina, I think one of the big things with, thank you, one of the big things with the alley is to try and create a ritual. How do you create a space where you can share cultures, where it's not an artifact, but it's a behavior? And so how can we share that? And that behavior has markers, which could be a samosa, and the samosa has its own identity because there are different types. And when you look at samosas, there's a whole load of debate about what shape should they be. Should they be flat? Should they be pyramids? There's circular ones.
Is it samosa? Is it sambusa? Is
Yeah.
it samosa?
And where's Afaf has got a theory about pasta and samosas. So, you know, it's kind of like, where does samosa lose its samosa-ness? And just that conversation is starting to build a culture of something. Now, what that's going to be, we have no idea. But I think making rituals is kind of our job. And so those artifacts become really interesting. We're all stuck in some sort of identity issues, and we cling on to some of these cultural tropes. But we also adapt them. But there's something, but it needs those anchors in the communities. And so going back to, you know, what are we're trying to create some of those anchors and rituals here, so that there's a sense of belonging. Now, who that's for, we're not quite sure yet. You know, so saying earlier, I came to an event here and I felt very old. It was 19 to 29. There's a lot of hip hop. It was really fascinating,
My
great
kind of
as an
vibe.
observer. Super interesting watch.
Yeah.
Then went to 421, very different age group, very different behavior.
50 meters up the road.
And, you know, we were talking about should they meet, should they not meet? And I think for me, I would love to be able to connect in between and go to them. Do they need to meet? I don't know. But it's nice that they can exist as neighbours. And I think that's what we want to do. How can we sustain it is going to be the question.
It's funny, it's just, as parents who are activists, those anchors are also some of the most unsung people in a community, right? And it's only until they're gone that people really feel the vacuum of that.
Yes.
And like I always ask myself as a young person, why let it get to that point? To the point where they either, you know, naturally disappear or don't do the work anymore? Why let it get to the point of them disappearing before I actually show appreciation and turn up? Like, what does it mean to be a mid-25-year-old and like really valuing these things? And like 25-year-olds or under 25-year-olds being really passionate about community, bringing that creative energy into a space and like wanting to be part of it. That for me is like really radical, really cool. And maybe it's also a challenge of the older generations, like how do you package these spaces to this young generation, right? Like my dad always used to say that our communities have a PR problem. And I think that sums up perfectly. Well, when you think about like growing up, and maybe I grew up in an environment where being brown, black, and Asian, like you didn't really want to be these things. You wanted to be like Western and like different, right? And
I didn't.
you didn't.
No,
What
never.
Tell me about that.
I was the child going on a school trip eating a sambusa sandwich when everybody else was bringing out cheese and pickle. Like, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I so owned it. Like, I was never shy or embarrassed about that at all, about my culture.
Yeah.
I think what I struggled with when I was younger was my father was very religious, very practicing, and mashallah, he was amazing. May God rest his soul. He had a beard. And he also wore, because he used to work in Saudi and he used to back and forth, he started like wearing a kandora to pick me up from school. And that was like strange. That was something that was not happening, and all the kids were like,
Were you ashamed of that, or?
I wasn't ashamed, but I just felt it was a bit different. So then I found myself saying to my father, who was like the love of my life, can you pick me up from around the corner? And I still remember that, and he said, why? I said, well, Dad, why are you dressed like this? And he said, because this is what I feel comfortable in. And I still remember that moment, and I remember his face when I said that. But that was, of course, I was 9 years old.
Our teenage daughter tells us that, can you pick us up around the corner? It's nothing to do with dress.
And you're wearing a shirt and tie.
And you're wearing a shirt and tie.
No, but like to that experience, like that, I think that's what I mean. It's not necessarily feeling proud of who we are, but there's a kind of, our cultures never felt, lack of a better word, cool, right? Yeah. So when I talk about a PR problem specifically, like, you know, you don't have to arrive to a certain age to understand the value in this, right? How do you attract the young person who wants to be rebellious and kind of like do cool stuff within their given environment, but like make it cool for them? Yeah. And that's the work that I do, right? So for me, like the whole work that I do in the online space is like, how do you make really meaningful things that make them accessible to young people? And what I found is that young people aren't apathetic, by the way, which is the biggest misconception, like that young people don't care, this is not things that they're not interested in. They deeply care, but they feel like these spaces aren't packaged in a way for them to seek benefit or to enjoy it in. So really that's the responsibility of us as people who kind of shape these spaces, being like, how do we draw this youthful energy and make them feel like this is a cool space for them to be on a Friday night?
That's something I think about all the time, creating spaces, designing spaces. But I look at Muhammad. You're creating community in a very different kind of space, a farm. Do you want to share a little bit of how you do that?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Hanan, for putting me on the spot. And
sorry, I didn't give you a heads up.
Well, actually, we run a family business, which some of you might know, which is Mazara, a farm open to public, an organic farm. This all started up with my grandmother back in the 60s. She's actually the first farmer in Abu Dhabi. And now it's a place that connects different segments of society. It's quite rare to see people that just gather like all different backgrounds, Emiratis, expats, intergenerational, as Nader mentioned. It's something so beautiful to see the kids connected to nature and actually see them passionate running into the field. I mean, this is something that just brings joy to us, to actually see people excited to see what you're doing and to see that community. And it's not just a place that you'd visit once in a while. We see people like regulars that come every single week, and it's a regular hangout. We have a coffee shop, we have a restaurant, and it's something so beautiful. And Hanan comes quite often, and we're happy to see everyone also.
If you haven't visited Mazara, really worth a trip. And just a 5-minute conversation with your father, you really feel the passion, back to what you're talking about, people who are, you know, have a passion for what they do, whatever that.
I'm actually convinced there are 3 Hanans, because she is everywhere.
Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing. We also have another friend who's started up a business recently, Nisreen, and it's food, flowers, and community. And that was a big part, the impetus for starting it, if I recall our early conversations, was around creating a community. Can you share a little bit about that and the inspiration and what it's been like? I think you've just had your 1-year anniversary.
Yes, we had our 1-year anniversary. Yeah. Mitik over here is my head chef. And we just got nominated for the Time Out's Best Restaurant, so we're looking forward to being in the running. There's so much to kind of draw on from what everybody's been saying. Zainab is my best friend, and we had very different experiences. She grew up in Lancashire and in East London, and then I grew up in Perth in Australia. And Perth was a very parochial, very white city. And migrating there in 1993 with my family, we were not only the only Palestinians, but we were the only Arabs and the only Muslim family within like 100-kilometer radius. So me and Zainab always had this conversation about how I felt racism very strongly growing up in the West, and she didn't have that experience, which is, we swapped notes a lot about that. Yeah. So actually, I wanted to come back to the region because I missed community. I wanted to be part of a community where I felt like I belonged. I grew up pretending a lot as well, like wanting to belong to a culture that wasn't really mine, and I couldn't find the spaces that I wanted to, or I felt I could belong in. Until I got to university, I met the first kind of Arab students. Like my first girlfriends were when I made them when I was 18, so because I couldn't get along with anybody else. So, and I think even like Nahla probably had a different experience growing up in the East Coast. Sydney is not like that. Sydney is a lot more multicultural. Again, parochial. Perth is very different. So I wanted to come back to my community, and obviously being Palestinian has its own complexities. So I felt like the Gulf, which is where I was born, is the closest I was ever going to get. Yeah. And so, yeah, I looked for the community within the community. And I think I wanted to also build on community. And where we got lucky with MISC is that we went into a community that already existed, which is the NYU community. And that was very serendipitous because I had a crush on NYU, I think, because I just felt like it was the intellectual hub that I was looking for, because I craved that and I missed that as well. And I looked for that when I moved to Abu Dhabi. So basically, I became an extension of the NYU community, and I built on the NYU community. I think that's what we've done with MISC. I think, and we became a conduit between the outside world, because NYU seems to be a little bit of a well-kept secret. So yeah, I think we became a conduit and also an extension of NYU. And you know, people seem to like what we're doing. So anyway, I'm going on now. Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you, Nasreen. Can't wait to see what the next chapter brings. We also have a member in the group who's building a different kind of community, Abdullah. Where's Abdullah? Yes, yes. Please, Abdullah, will you share? I think what you're doing is amazing, and it's a segment of the community that we probably don't know or hear as much about.
I was about to leave. My kids are gonna sleep. And,
Abdullah is a stand-up comedian.
Just like, oh, can we leave now? It's like, give them a few minutes.
I
guess I should have left then, yeah? So first of all, I want to thank the music community. I've been working with them for more than 2 years now. And I've been working with the MISA team for more than 2 years now. We're working on a project, but before I speak about the project, I want to, thank this community. I came with an idea. We built it together. So what's my idea? Basically, I'm creating a community for children of determination. I want to create, what do you call it? So I want to create, in simple terms, I don't want a clinic with a play area. I want a play area with a clinic. I want somewhere where children will come and have fun, not only intimidated and exposed to the sterile work environment which I worked in. I'm a general practitioner. I have experience in neurology, mental health, and psychology. And that's where my passion brought me here to MISA. And I think our project will be big. It's found a place here in MISA. And I believe we can create a community that will prosper, because this place is not only for children, it's for everybody. I want to reintroduce the concept of play. As you said, food, culture, they're all sense of social interactions that we started to build on and create communities. But for me, it's the first time we played. It's the first social interaction we ever had. Playing with a ball means a lot. passing it to your your friend or something that creates the sense of community. So role playing, for example, or I'll be a doctor, you'll be the patient, or I'm the fireman. So again, we're building the sense of community through the concept of play, which is simple and we forgot it. And I believe that we can re-implement it not only for our children, but to everybody. So I guess everybody is welcome to the center when it opens, hopefully. And one more thing I want to do is I want to study the social interaction. So it's not only about providing a service. Hopefully in the center there's going to be research and innovation and development. And we're still at the early stages.
But
2 years, but...
what I loved about our conversation, it goes back to that identity. You know, we focus very quickly on racial, cultural identity, but I think, you know, the conversation we've been having is what do you do with autism? What do you do with people with determination? I used to do, where's Ree? Ree's a product... Ree's a product designer I met ages ago. We were doing a lot of work in the disability area. Yeah. And Ree had designed some walking canes, and it was all around disabled products are designed to look disabled. Yeah. Many years ago, I worked on people that remember the Palm Pilot, if you're old enough, worked on the Palm Pilot for the blind. And what it would do was put out letters in Braille. And we designed it as a product designer, we designed it, and it was bright purple. This was going back quite a long while. And we gave it to the blind people to test. And they came back and said, it's ugly. And we said, how do you know it's ugly? You're blind. He goes, no, but everyone else can see it. Yeah. And so people were telling them, what's that ugly purple thing that you're carrying around? And so there's something about the way we stigmatize disabilities. And, you know, I've designed wheelchairs in the past, and I still don't know how to approach someone in a wheelchair. You know, do you want help? Yeah. And it's really tricky. And so when you were talking about trying to create this place of play, because parents who have kids that are disabled, you don't know how to deal with them in a public space because they don't belong, they get shunned. Yeah. And people don't know how, the siblings don't know how to react, and we get embarrassed. And so what happens is those kids, we don't take them out.
Yes.
And same in restaurants. And so, you know, the idea I think you've come up with that, let's make it normal now for those, exactly. And then we can now, that I think is a world-changing idea.
Thank you, and Pradeep has been a major influence in this idea. I just want to say, yes, it's about seclusion. That's the word. Children of determination have been secluded from the community. When I did my market analysis, I visited, you know, the centers that are here, and I've only seen, for example, a center for autism, a center for, so it really, you know, took them out of the community, that they're a crucial part of it. And then I take my children, I have, God bless, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I love to go to playhouses with them. And I love to go inside the maze, you know? So I'd want something that fits me, not only, you know? And they love it, yeah? They love it when I interact. And the thing is, I've noticed it, and I've asked many of the owners, what will happen if, for example, an autistic child throw a tantrum, yeah? Or an ADHD, or a conduct disorder, or all of those labels, I say neurodiverse, neurotypical. What happens if they throw a tantrum, if they hit another person? They told me, oh, we'll just call the parents and take them away. So here I was like, okay, we need to create a place where all children could come and interact normally. Fights happen, tantrums happen, and they all should be dealt by the children themselves. So I relate to the children how to deal with their problems, and this is what I've seen that's lacking in the playhouses and in the therapy areas. So
I'd say in work as well, I think there are many corporates that could benefit
I was
from
going to say, you can take your theories and knowledge and apply it to the business world.
I believe that we're all toddlers, you know, experiencing this world for the first time. Yeah.
Wonderful way to look at it.
We all throw tantrums. Right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Abdullah.
Thank you.
Where's Nadir?
I love this, by the way.
We just had a bromance moment. Love your work, bro.
Are you comfortable there?
Yeah, just play in the room.
We have another member. Do you mind, Nader? It's okay.
I'm joking.
Tariq, your business may not be as community focused, but maybe it's one of those that needs the creative alone space. I mean, and you're tell us about your business. You're working in Musaffah in a remote area. You're thinking about a move. Not thinking, hopefully more.
I got my keys.
Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'll say a few things before I even talk about community. I don't think I've ever felt this much part of a community because I can relate to every single word that came out of everyone's mouth. Someone who was born in India, raised in Pakistan, spent all my life in America. Someone who had ADHD and dyslexia all my life and diagnosed really later. Still went through university, did my bachelor's, all my education, and had a wonderful life. Opportunity brought here 12 years ago. Never in a million years would have thought I'll be sitting with this wonderful, wonderful part of a community, talking about community. One thing I learned, and this is my personal opinion, a community cannot be created with any kind of a hidden motive behind it. Any financial, any religious, any other kind of hidden motive at all. It is just like taking a seed and putting it in a planter and believing that with the right amount of moisture, with the right amount of sunlight, it will do its thing because nature then takes action from there on. If we have doubts and we keep on digging it inside to see, is it growing? Did it start? Is it germinating? That is when we completely disrupted the nature's process. And this is what I see here. All the right mindsets, right energies, right backgrounds are put together, and you just let them do their thing. And that is exactly what's happening. And I'm absolutely honored and humbled by being someone who calls myself part of this. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Now going back to, thank you very much. I'm absolutely, completely humbled by being part of this room, being part of you guys here. Most of my day is spent in Musaffah for last 9 years. I go to M46, put my head down, and do what I do. And we have amazing list of things, where we made it with. The idea is when we put our head down again and without any hidden motive, keep letting the absolute passion come in some kind of a creative energy, things start to happen that we become a witness of as well. And just as long as the energy is right, just follow the passion. So I cannot wait to see what we create here. Super excited to be part of this, guys. Thank you so much for including me.
I just want to pick up on that because I think that's going back to that culture's an emergent thing. You know, the number of governments, and so I've had the privilege to work in many countries around the world to try and build these sort of sectors, and governments that say they want to build a Silicon Valley will never do it. It's their own, because you don't build Silicon Valley, it's an emergent. And so, you know, people have tried to, you can't recreate this culture. You know, we think there's a formula that we can just take out and we can do this again in Musaffah or another part. It's not going to do that. And so I think it is an emergent property. So I think that analogy of a seed, all we can do is tend it. And I think as those cornerstones of parents and people and pillars, that's our role to try and tend that seed. Yeah. But the culture's going to go the way the culture's going to go.
That's a really beautiful point. I feel like, amazing, by the way. Gosh, I feel so inspired. I feel like if you were to run through the gates of hell, I'd probably follow you at the same time. I think like you saying what you were saying just now, I felt like one of the challenges perhaps is that it also requires people, I don't want to deify culture. Sometimes culture can be a very difficult thing, right? Sometimes culture is constraining. Sometimes culture is an obstacle to a lot of people. Sometimes culture is restricting. And I think the bravery with spaces that are trying to create something new is understanding what we're prepared to leave behind. And I'm saying this, given my own mixed environment, is that I'm a shell. Culturally, I can only hold so much. So a lot of my youth was understanding, like, what about my Yemeniness do I want to maintain? What about my Indonesianness do I want to maintain? What am I willing to sacrifice in my Pakistaniness? What am I willing to let go of? And like any space, any human has to have these kind of conversations internally as well. And I feel like there are things about our culture. We have to have a deep down, serious conversation being like, does this work within a new modern culture that we're building today in a space? What are we prepared to take with us and what are we willing to leave behind? And these are harder, granular conversations that can be had over time. And yes, they will happen naturally. But I remember throughout my youth, if my youth is to be a case study at all, there were some really like difficult conversations I had to have with myself in full transparency and honesty. And that's part of the process also.
Can I just ask, is there a particular culture that you gravitate towards more?
Not necessarily growing up. I have to say my parents did a great job in like giving every culture space, which took brave. So if you think of my parents as the first mixed people, I'm the next generation, so like we're even more mixed. So it's like even more abstracted. So like, it's funny because I guess I'm projecting this word on myself. I was going to say diluted, but that's not what I mean at all, right? But like, it's just, I guess, because you hear it all the time, people saying it to you, it's the first thing that came to my mind. Just because I'm quarter of something doesn't mean I don't fully feel it, right? These are all cultures with like deep histories and legacies and traditions that I fully feel all of them. Weirdly, because I am mixed, I actually feel like I understand them more than people who are fully part of them because I make an active effort to be part of them, right? But like I said before, it was just about understanding that like a person can hold only so much. And like a very simple thing is like, for example, to make it more specific to you, is like, let's say a wedding. And you're like, okay, cool, like what, if you use wedding as a case study or a metaphor, it'd be like, what culture would that wedding be?
Exactly.
Like, are you gonna have like?
Are you going,
Actually, those are the rituals.
Yeah, and this
Those
is where it
moments,
becomes complicated.
the weddings, the funerals,
Exactly.
the birth. Yeah, that's where.
So it's all
the
good and well
rub
when it's
happens.
convenient and it's like when it's easy, but like it becomes a hard conversation when it's hard.
Yes, it does.
And like that's when I've had to find it difficult defining who I am by how people expect it to be defined. And me and my sister found innovative ways to go about it. And sorry, I'm using a lot of personal anecdotes, but I think they're relevant in the case of a space. Like, if it was Eid, me and my sister would stitch different cultures' clothing together. We would literally like have an Indonesian batik on one quarter, but then we'd have like a Pakistani silhouette, and then a Yemeni turban, and it would be like this amalgam of like these cultures.
And how rich is that?
Yeah, exactly. So like more culture didn't make it difficult, it made it more complex and more rich in its essence, and that is a metaphor for a space. And I think it's funny because the personal conversations I have will be the conversations that we have in spaces like this also.
I do find context changes. So my daughter is completely confused. So she's born in Bath, Kiwi mother.
You want to complexify
England
her life.
Yeah. And she spent most of her time in the States. Now she's here. And what I find with her is that she can change accents in an instant. So when she talks to American friends, we have no idea who she is. And then she talks to my wife, and it's all, yes, yeah, g'day, mate. It's really cute. And when she talks to my mother, the head wobble comes in, and she goes, it's just fascinating that she can just adopt those identities in language. And the accent change. And I think that's kind of a richness that I think, there's a part of me that sort of regrets not having a culture to cling on to, but actually there's a richness in it that does allow you to be global.
What about language? Because along with the culture comes language. And
she's very upset that I haven't been teaching her Hindi, which is also my mother's complaint. But
yeah, and I
Great
think
question.
this is something that I've experienced myself firsthand growing up in my family, and my brother was the first person in our community to marry out of the Indian community. And the first thing, my parents are very open-minded, as long as, for us, the religion came first before the culture. So as long as they were Muslim, that was the first most important priority. But once he got married, the question was, what's going to happen with the kids and what language they're going to speak? And At the time I was 16, I was like, they should speak both languages. My sister-in-law's, she speaks Pashto. My brother's Gujarati. They speak both languages. It didn't happen. Didn't happen with them. Didn't happen with all of our kids, actually. And to the point where when I had my daughter, I used to translate Disney books. We would try to read them in Gujarati. So we wanted to really ensure that she would learn the language. She understands the language. She doesn't speak it.
Language is, like all cultures, you have to practice. And language is really difficult if both of you don't speak it.
So we have the lingua franca, English.
But lingua, like I hear that, and I was expecting that to come out. But like a lingua franca can also be like compassion, and like love, and like community. Like as someone who was told like my Arabic wasn't good enough, or my Swahili wasn't good enough, my Indonesian wasn't good enough, I was like, my culture is so much more than just these words. Like, yes, of course, it's a key to culture, and I believe language is really pivotal in that. But like, culture is a language of the heart for me. It was so much more than that, right? And like a perfect example, I use personal anecdote. I'm just checking how many people I know here who know me. I've got some relatives in here. Keep it quiet. But just a personal anecdote is that like a friend of mine set me up on this blind date. All right? Let me lay the scene for you, right? Friends are very concerned for me. I'm getting in an age where they're a little bit worried.
We're all a bit
Sent me on this
concerned.
blind date, sent me a message being like, be here, be here, be here, right? I was like, cool, you know, whatever, let's go through and have this experience. Met an amazing Palestinian girl. She was lovely, right? We got chatting, and we actually had a really fascinating conversation about culture, art, especially in the context of everything that was happening in the world today. And then, within the context of what we talked about, I actually said to her, I was like, but don't you feel like, yes, Palestinian culture is at threat right now in terms of erasure and potentially being wiped out? So don't you feel like there's an added responsibility of like marrying within the Palestinian culture to preserve those traditions? So like you have a romantic responsibility to that culture. So if I'm triggering anyone, let me know.
Your kids are Palestinian.
And I said this to her, right? And she was like, oof. She's like, she never thought about it that way. And she was like, I guess so.
Yeah. It was nice knowing you.
But like, you know what? Yeah, basically. But like, we ended. No, you know what? Do you know what it was?
You need to be with one of your own.
It transitioned from being something that was a bit of fun to actually being quite meaningful. Like, we're actually friends now, right? And I love that interaction through
I
it.
don't believe
Nadir, like, she's here tonight.
She's here today, everybody, as well. My wife. No, but the whole moral of the story is that I challenged her again and be like, yeah, you could see it that way. But you could be with a Palestinian who knew nothing about Palestinian history, culture, and art. But by blood, yes, technically, genetically, he embodies these things. So what's really more important to you? That he looks Palestinian, or is he could be a non-Palestinian, and he's studied extensively the essence of Palestinianness, feels passionate about what it is, like engages with it, contributes to it. So what does it really mean to be part of anything cultural, or to take ownership of it, or to be proud of it? It's so much more than genetics and like what comes out of our tongue. It's how we embody these practices. And that's where I keep pushing people to think deeper about your culture. Most of the stuff we kind of align with is quite superficial. But like deeply look at your cultures, and actually I think you'll find like all of us have a lot more similar than we have difference. But yeah. She's all right.
it's here, you know, like, so I understand, like, the whole world is dealing and doing whatever they need to do and, like, making sense of it for them, which, like, do what you need to do, you know, but I feel like there's a lot of experts that sometimes when people have these conversations, they don't go to the experts. Like, I remember hearing something you said about, in some, I can't remember what it was, but you were mentioning something along the lines of we go to our parents, or like the parents of the pioneers, or like the elder generation. And it's like, everything is already done. Everyone's just trying to find new things, new ways to do things. When it's done, you just need to listen to people. There's a lot of ego. I'm learning, like, I've worked everywhere, you know, I've lived in it. I've worked a lot of places and realized that if you have, like, I think you were mentioning as well, if you do things with passion, if you do things, like, purely, you see, like, the effect. So, I forgot even what I was you're talking about. On, like, we talked about not just love life.
We're talking about my love life, dude. I'm joking.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of trauma, like, people don't realize, and it's like, just go to therapy.
Yeah,
I know it's easy to say that, but do, like, there is a lot of tools.
I got you.
Looking for the tools.
This is actually really interesting. Like I hear what you're saying, and like so I facilitate a lot of community space in London specifically, right? For example, I do regular events like this, but we also used to run like fitness and wellness kind of spaces, and like I have the biggest run club in London. I think it's like every Wednesday it's around 130 brown and black people and running in the streets of London, which can you imagine causes a bit of a stir. And it's a big party. People are strapped with speakers, and it's like a big, like, really good. You should come. You'd love it. But it's a really fun night, and
How often do you do it?
it was every week. It was every week. So it was people came. It was just there's something about running which is very like stripping. Like that was a weird word. Sorry,
Okay,
pardon.
we went
Wait,
from
there's
girl
some-
to
there's-
stripping.
there's something about
It's
running
Ramadan.
that's very vulnerable. People are like, they're sweating, and like people are like struggling, and it's raw, exactly. So like thank God, I was the beads of sweat. I was struggling with that. No, so it's and people really kind of nurture really strong relationships in that environment. But why I bring it up also is that I noticed within this community after about 6-7 months of it running is that people were bringing their traumas into the space, right? So now suddenly as community leaders, do you have big enough shoulders to carry that burden, right? And that was another thing with community space, which was a big challenge, is that the community has individual issues which they will bring into the space, and at times they will also like cause the space itself issues. So the space has to kind of figure out a means of like remedying that, having big shoulders and a responsibility to encompass the challenges that people are going through within their individual lives. But 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I think these are some of the things we'll face in like your community, co-working, co-op type spaces, co-living spaces. How do we navigate all of that
Therapy
as a
is never
community?
far away. I mean, it's part of how societies heal. I
Yeah.
think we need those spaces.
I think you should have resident therapists and all the co-creating,
Absolutely.
co-working spaces. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
I also wanted to challenge you on something you said before about you said the Filipinos playing basketball, then you had the Indians playing cricket, which is lovely, which is beautiful. And like, what does it mean to bring these people together? But the question to everyone is like, do we all need to be together?
Yes. Yeah, that's
Right? But yeah, like maybe this is something that us in this room kind of vibe and energy with, but some people are quite happy within their given.
I don't know if you remember that dreadful song in the 80s. I shouldn't say the word dreadful. Let's put a judgment on it. That song in the 80s, which what we need is a big old melting pot, put all the people in it and see what we've got. And we'd all come out beige, and they're thinking, how boring would that be? And so I think that identity, we should support it. And I don't think it needs to get together all the time. I think the opportunity is, how can we move between it? I think that's what I'm excited by. That's
I do want to ask a couple other members in our community here who are
this is what Hanan does, by the way. So
Jawhara al-Anud. Sorry, I can't turn my head. But you were one of the first movers, if I may say, in the Misa community. We'd love to hear you share with everybody a bit of your journey and how you feel about community.
So we
Yes.
found out we're related, Nader and I. My mother is a Nahdi, so yeah. So before we talk about Miza, Maryam and I were just discussing culture. There's something that we don't address a lot. It's the Emirati culture. And within the Emirati cultures, there are multiple cultures. So for example, Maryam's mother is Bahraini. We come from a Yemeni background. And then you don't fit in completely. So no matter what you say, you're like, I have a family name that's not well known. It's bin Ishaq. So like, people are like, where are you from? You know, regardless of. Yeah, and the language, the accent. But then Miza has broken that up for us. As Tariq mentioned, we were over for the iftar and he mentioned something and it hit a nerve for me. We always felt lonely whenever we left our corporate jobs. But Miza gave us that community. It gave us a space to be, to share knowledge, to actually address the challenges we're facing as entrepreneurs. Because it's a very difficult, lonely journey. And knowing all these people here with different backgrounds, different businesses, you learn a lot from them. And you know it's okay to face all these challenges. So just to give you a background about what we're opening here, we're having a concept store, Al-Anud and myself. It's to support local designers and artists and specialty coffee. Al-Anud is super passionate. She actually escaped today to grab a proper cup of coffee from Oro. And we host multiple events here also, mental health events, and we have a pop-up coming up next week. It's called Mgallat. We'd love to see you all here, inshallah. Yes, I've been doing this all night, literally. We want to see everyone in Mgallat. And it's basically a suhoor night. If everyone doesn't know, we love to play games in Ramadan. So there's going to be games, there's going to be food, there's going to be retail for Eid and for Ramadan. And I would love to have our mental health specialist talk here. There was a lot of trauma talk, so
Yes.
my business partner and my best friend here.
I'm just gonna share one thing. Thank you for creating Miza, because we've been feeling like isolated, especially when we leave our jobs, as Johara said, and bringing all creative in one space of community, whereas every other thing's dissolved. Like you don't talk about from where you are, but we are here to create, and we are here in one community. So thank you.
Wow, that was very moving. Thank you, Johar. Thank you, Al-Anud. That really, just hearing this for me, we're day to day working here and we're in plans and design and construction and contractors and all of that. And it's really just heartwarming to hear this from our Miza tenants and from everybody around here. But I do want to give a few moments to somebody who's been really pivotal and critical to building the community at Miza, Zarina. Zarina is our head of community. Zarina and her team really are the dynamo behind everything that we are experiencing and benefiting. And Zarina, please.
Oh, I love it. By the way, that is not true.
There
There are so many
come
people
into the
behind
light,
this.
Zarina.
Sorry?
Come into the light.
No, I actually have a question for all of you. So Nader, I do want you to go back, please. Thank you for handling the mics today. But I just wanted to ask a question to all four of you. I think I've known you, Zainab, for 2 weeks now, Pradeep and Nader for... Okay, fine. Ooh, okay. I had a question for all four of you. You are all community builders in your own right, in your own way. Hanan, you host the most incredible... Hanan tells us where to sit in meetings because Hanan cares so much about how people connect. Zainab, I've known you for a week and I've seen the passion that you have for hosting. 2 weeks, right? For hosting and bringing people together around food, around stories. Pradeep, you're everybody's mentor, right? Oftentimes the voice of reason and the voice of vision for us in this project. And Nader, you are kind of globally known for this, right? So the question I have for you four is, what advice do you have for people who are looking to build community? People like us, actually, at Misa, right, is we are trying to bring people together. We're trying to connect people to a space. What advice do you have for us?
Just a number of words. I mean, the first phrase, commit and figure it out. You know, that to me is one of the things is, if you commit, a lot of things go away. And I think, you know, quite often we don't see that commitment, or we see it half-hearted. So commit and figure it out. And the other one is be generous. I think those are the only two, is be generous. I think sharing, we try to own things too much. So
I guess I would say, what are you sacrificing for community? What are you contributing to the community? I think there are so many benefits and so much goodness and so much investment made in a real rooted community, but it requires all of us to make some sort of contribution. And that might just be your time, just turning up and filling this room towards someone taking a more active role in the community and actually engaging and coming up with creative ideas. That whole spectrum can be considered contribution. So I just ask ourselves, like, how are we contributing, sacrificing to create this space?
I would add to the commitment is the consistency. To commit to what we're doing and do it consistently so that people know that we're here, that they can find what they're looking for, that they can contribute. Yeah, I find that in the long run very important. Because we see a lot of things that stop and start. It's still a transient society to a certain extent. It's becoming less so. So there's I have an amazing ballet teacher. There's a great community around ballet. Then the ballet teacher leaves, poof, no more ballet. Like, you see that a lot. So any community you're building, I always, having lived here so long and seen this happen, I think of consistency. Yeah. So how you show up and then make sure that others are showing up if you're not, and if you're going to move on, pass the baton to someone else, like that longer term part of it.
I would add to exactly what Hanan was saying about consistency and sacrifice, but also about brand advocacy. So right now, you've brought people here that have never been to Misa. And it's through, whether it's the guise of a supper club or whether that's a Ramadan event or, whatever that is in terms of the programming that you have got going on, you then turn these people that are coming into brand advocates who then tell other people. And this is how the community will be created, and you're going to build equity into that. And then, I will tell my friends and my family, and before you know it, this will be a thriving community of people that believe in it, but also giving people the space and a safe space to be themselves, to say what they would like to say. And I think this is also very important. And this is a feeling that we get when we're here. I've been here 2 days and I feel that way. We did. So we met at the Businesswomen's Council. And then we talked about Misa and the pop-up. That's right. And you're creating a cult following here. It's happening. It's happening, and we can see it, and it's happening before our very eyes. And
Nader,
you guys should be very
now.
proud.
Yeah,
Nader,
what's the ritual? Is there going to be like some holy water that's doused on me or something?
Just two quick comments to add to that. And I think some of the day you said, some Tarek you said. In the German language, there's the word Schadenfreude that I think most people know, and it's really hard to. So Schadenfreude means you take pleasure in other people's demise, and but it's really common. It's surprisingly much more common than the other one, because the Germans, there isn't another word for the other one. The only closest word I can find is mudita, which is a Sanskrit word. And what it means is you take pleasure in other people's success without wanting anything back. And so how do we do that? Because I think if we try and build this community with the expectation we want something back, it's not really going to work. And so mudita is something I think is really, really important. I think to take joy in other people just for the sake of them doing well. How do we do that? And that it is hard, and it is a practice. As I say, Schadenfreude, just look at all the TV that we're watching. We enjoy reading bad news. Bad news travels. Good news doesn't travel. And so Mudita is something I think we need to sort of work on a lot more.
Thank you. I think would wrap it up. But anybody else want to say anything in the audience? Yes, Mariam, تفضلي. So, Mariam, we'd love to unpack that further with you. I'd love to host more of conversations along those and really bring in more diverse Emiratis to the conversation that we can engage with. It'd be amazing, Zarina. We have to do something along those lines.
It's that rawness you talked about in while running.
Yes.
I think that is something that's maybe the biggest risk also. Losing that will influence.
This isn't happening in Galleria Mall. You know, and I think that's in so part of the challenge is how do we not over gentrify but keep that rawness? I think
Zarina, that's
the
another
fight.
topic we'd love to unpack. Yeah, no, really the design for spaces like that. Because Razmith, we even feel it with the alley that just was an accident that happened. The guy who owned the warehouse next to us decided he wanted to take his warehouse and move it to his farm. So came, ripped off the steel. I mean, there's value in it. Took it off, and then we're sitting up in our offices looking out the window, and there's like this flat slab. And the guy's like, well, what shall we do with it? And they're like, okay, let's create, who are you pointing to? Khulud Wa'ad? Khulud Wa'ad, yes. Actually, everybody talks about the Miza brand and our logo and our visuals and our graphics and our vibe. These two ladies.
Three
ladies now. The three.
The only thing we never got was our car wash.
Yeah.
So they came up with the alley, and what's really, to your point, Razmith, is it has such a physical low barrier to entry. You can just stroll in. We're not ticketing, we're not counting, we're not keeping track of anybody, we're not screening anyone. You just come in.
You're not measuring footfall, Hanan.
We're not measuring footfall, right? Well, no, that's another problem. One other question, please. Dorian.
Hello, everybody.
Dorian.
Is he going to sing for us?
I'm going to sing right now. Yes.
Dorian, you need your whole special session.
No, I don't. It's an honor to be here. Just listening to all the great conversation just has me thinking I'm a poet. So I look at community like a tapestry. And so whether it's a person with a farm or a center for special needs or this mystery business that you never talked about, or the cafe at NYU Abu Dhabi, we're all putting our colors into this tapestry, our own sewing techniques, and maybe even the different fabrics. And a lot of times I think we work as community builders from the back of the tapestry. And if you know anything about tapestry, that's kind of the ugly parts with the knots and the mistakes, which could be a canceled event or maybe not choosing the right venue or having maybe a complaint, the bathroom wasn't clean at the venue, and you're having to learn as you go. But when you flip the tapestry over, maybe 10 years later, when it's finished, it's like, oh, that's the Abu Dhabi community, or that's the Abu Dhabi culture and art scene. And so I want to thank Miza, the whole Mina Port community, Warehouse 421. I was at the opening weekend there, and there were like world-class acts activating a Dow graveyard in this community. And it was just like you're looking at 200-year dials. So there's so much poetry going on, so much meaning, Emirati history, and all this convergence. And then Miza's first alley event, just giving the community the opportunity to apply for warehouses. And I'm a poetry organizer, poetry event organizer. I've been blessed to grow into, culture and arts curation and programming different culture and nightlife events. But when I would leave these events, they would be monthly events or bi-weekly events, there was always kind of this sad feeling, like this amazing community feeling, and then I had to go, or I'll be back next month. And so what I like about Miza and similar spaces in Minapur is that this is like a living, breathing community intended. We know Al Sarkal, which is doing great things in Dubai, and Miza doesn't aim to be Al Sarkal, but in the same thread or vein, I really like that it's aiming to be like a minute-to-minute community, a right-now community, and that fills that void that I think a lot of people, if you're from Abu Dhabi, it's like we need a space where an artist, a poet, a musician can just go sit in the alley and meet people organically. So Zarina, Khalu, Hanan, so many of you, Pradeep, thank you for everything you're doing, and we're really excited to see the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorian. Thank you, Dorian. Is there one more?
Allah as well, sorry.